Good morning, grasshoppers. Put on some light music in the background. I am going to block out the music just a little bit. You know what? I'm going without the music for a moment because we're going to attempt to do this study also for a YouTube edit rather than saving it permanently on Twitch. I think I've attempted to do. We'll find out in short order. I realize we're also missing our timer. If I can find our timer. Is that our timer? There we go. We really don't need that much time. Let's set it for 1 minute. Testing. Set. Good. Timer set. Just in case we have some moments in the U.S. Chess Championship Brilliancies that were played over the years. Perhaps one of the least known and one of the earliest, the Paul M. Albert Brilliancy Prizes. I am using a book that was supposed to be written by Joel Benjamin and myself, but we missed out on this opportunity because we were a little bit late. Grandmaster Joel Benjamin and I were at the U.S. Championship in 2001 together. I was coaching a young international master, or a young FIDE master trying to become an international master. And Paul M. Albert had approached us to write this book. Unfortunately, we weren't able to follow through, so Paul Albert did find, fortunately, Danny Kopak, the amazing Dr. Danny Kopak, and Lubomir Fatachnik. I won't call him Lubosh, I don't know him that well. But they did an amazing job, for the most part, an amazing job putting this book together. Let's turn down the sound on our master test just a little bit. It seems quite loud. Let's see how this sound is. Still quite loud. And it's echoing, I think. Right? There we go. We don't need it that loud. Is it echoing because it's also playing through another device? Let me just quickly check my mixer for Discord and for Chrome. Output device default. We'll cross our fingers that this is correct. And if so, then I might need to move to now, personally, my favorite way of continuing against the Caro-Kann is the Panov Botvinnik. I feel this gives the most tension, allows the greatest of open lines, and offers white the best possibilities of really testing black as to whether or not they can place their pieces properly. However, it's not for everybody. The next most important way of dealing with the Caro-Kann is knight to c3. And it is the way chosen here. I think that every young master should begin with this particular line because we need to get our pieces out. I'm not a huge fan of the advanced variation. I would almost call the advanced variation the advanced defense because you end up defending your center and hoping not to get the center broken down, and there's a lot of maneuvering. And, I mean, black has to have one plan against, and I learned this from Grandmaster Joel Benjamin. When white plays a very committal plan as early as 2, 3, 4, or 5, like bishop f4 on move 2, then black only needs to have one determined and disciplined plan against your opening. However, if you do not tip your hand as much, if you leave all the possibilities open, then it makes it much more difficult for your opponent to actually understand what's going on, and at the same time makes it more difficult for them to let's just say, be theory bound, right? So, for example, if someone plays a King's Indian attack, I get to set my pieces how I want every single time. So if they played knight f3, g3, bishop g2, and castles, they don't do anything to me for the first 4 or 5 moves. That's fine. I get to set up my pieces the way I want, and I have a set system against the King's Indian attack, and every young player might have a set system against the King's Indian attack, and this is not really going to challenge them. However, in this particular setup, Jack Peters, international master Jack Peters of California, he wrote for the Los Angeles, he wrote for a major Los Angeles newspaper at the time. I'm drawing a blank on which one it was. He has since retired, I believe. Is playing white, and several-time U.S. champion Yasser Seirawan and world championship contender is playing black. Yasser Seirawan, of course, is very well known for his commentary, and we should have Yasser's commentary in the background. That would be very cute and appropriate. Now, you can't just walk away from this particular defense and flinch because black gets h5, h4, and honestly, black could easily be better in this position. So the only way to really deal with this is to play knight takes f6. And with knight takes f6, black has 2 ways of playing with black. And this in 1984 led to an advent of a lot of players playing the Bronstein-Larsen variation. Today, the most popular line is e takes f6, with the idea of playing h5 as well. But in those days, this line was not clearly understood to be that awkward. Today we know that white might easily win a pawn against this line, because any pawn on h5 can be ganged up to pawn with bishop e2, knight on g to e2, knight to g3. Of course, we're going to fix the pawn in place with h4, and it's just very awkward trying to defend this pawn in a hurry, and we also don't want to defend this pawn. But this pawn is a key part of our attacking system as black if we want to go after the g pawn or a king that's on g1. And we're going to see this in this particular game, I believe. We're going to see this particular plan. So here we are in this particular plan as black. Basically, white plays the most flexible 6th move possible, which is c3. Bishop f5 is standard. After all, we need to unfurl our queen side as well. We also want to keep in mind the possibility of pushing our e-pawn 2 squares as black. So white goes after this bishop in an attempt to embarrass it. As we've already noted, this bishop has very few squares to choose from. And now, of course, we're going to begin with the attack. And this forces black's pawn to h5. And we've already discussed this just now, my not knowing exactly how this opening was going to pan out. However, I was studying chess shortly after this U.S. championship on a religious basis. And I couldn't believe that anyone would actually play this variation. So the only way to defend the h5 pawn is with queen a5, which incurs the wrath of b4. And of course, if we play queen to d5, it only appears that we're holding on to that pawn for a short period of time. We can dance back and forth between these 2 squares, but in general, it's best just to give it up. Unfortunately, there is no chance really to hold it with any level of comfort. So, as it turns out, queen to c7, and the pawn falls. Now I've played this as white. I think I even played it with white in the last week. So Jack Peters has managed to capture black's pawn, and you might wonder why we're sitting on the black side of this. Well, Yasser Seirawan, of course, is no one to be trifled with. A pawn is just a pawn. It's not a W. That's the number one thing I'm going to say, is that a pawn is not a W. It is a minor step on the way towards a win, but you have a lot of difficulty to work with. Black stops knight f4, which would further weaken the white squares and tag bishop on g6. After all, that was a real possibility, and it's probably the best move. I don't think my opponent played this way against me this week, unfortunately. I'm going to have to look that game up. It's in my profile. Anyone can find it. So the knight reroutes itself back, and black's king castles on the queen side, and you can see that white's pawns are already feeling just a little bit under pressure. Jack Peters, of course, needs to take care of his h4 pawn so that it's not necessarily guarded by just the rook, and goes about securing the pawns on his queen side. So now it's time for a plan for black. And this is the first moment where we're going to give everyone a chance to look for candidates with black. Now, the purpose of a candidate move is not to find the best move. The purpose of a candidate move is to scan the position for all of the possible best moves. By looking for all the possible best moves in the position, one will hope to find a very good move, perhaps a better than a very good move, maybe even the best move, but we can't actually find the best move without having something to compare the best move to. I've seen many students in these positions try to hold on to this, to their line of thought by constantly scouring for the best move and then analyzing the best move deeply, but it doesn't really work. Honestly, it does not work to scour for the best move unless you've scanned for all the good moves. So in this particular position, one might think about developing the dark squared bishop. One might place a rook. One might move a pawn. One might move a knight. That's quite a hella choice, right? So in this particular position, likely candidates are bishop to d6, rook to e8, right? f5. All these moves seem perfectly reasonable and good. Let's see, f5 threatening f4, of course, and white may or may not have to give up the center. Oh, we're sacking a pawn on f7 as well, so we have to keep that in mind. So keeping that in mind, Jack Peters faces the move knight to b6 by Yasser Seirawan. Now, knight to b6 is not the best move. Be honest. The pawn on f7 is not worth that much. The white king in the center is. So ideally, noting the weakness of the position, we have to go by Jakob Aagaard's equation of asking yourself 3 questions. Where are the weaknesses? What is my opponent's idea? And work from there. Hold on. I just drew a blank on the third question. That's crazy that I just drew a blank on the third question. Now, Pegasus, of course, just resubscribed yesterday, so I'm going to try to make this as complete as possible. Let me grab my Aagaard book for a moment, just to refresh my memory. Whoa. I'm missing the book Positional Play. Where is my positional play? That's crazy. The 3 questions. Someone can... That is crazy. Grandmaster Preparation. This book series, by the way, is quite amazing. Absolutely stunning. I've forgotten how good these books are. We may have to do them in a series. But for the most part, the really lovely thing about this that I'd forgotten about is that they have a nice picture of Mihail Sarin collapsed over Yakov Algar's calculation. And he's literally just collapsed, and he is sleeping on top of it. And this picture was taken before Mihail Sarin became an international master at the age of 12. So we're definitely going to have to put these books aside, because I am serious about improving my chess and becoming the ultimate chess adult improver. So noting that this is a weakness, I'll come back to the third question in just a moment. But for the most part, what is the worst placed piece? What is my opponent's idea? And where are the weaknesses? Those are the three questions. This is certainly White's worst placed piece. So playing the move after queen to c2, bishop to d6 seems very, very reasonable. Going after that white knight. Also playing the move f5 seems very, very reasonable, going after that knight. So I would choose either of those moves as a candidate move over knight to b6. Knight to b6 has the triple function of guarding the pawn on f7 with the queen. With really, Yasser? Is that really what we want to do? And the note in the book is that Yasser played this move as part of a resourceful counterattack. And White, of course, should just castle. We're looking for candidate moves for White. White has bishop to g4 check as a result of the knight moving. White has a way of clarifying the center by capturing on e5. The queen, if the queen's really going to capture, will be giving up the pawn. Or will it? I take that back. The c3 pawn will be falling. What will be happening in that particular instance? Well, the queen doesn't really want to capture in general, right? We don't want to leave our pawns like that. We'll have to recapture with the pawn to keep our pawns going. And lastly, of course, White could even play the move king f1 and probably be safe on the open f file, as long as White's bishop finds a good square in the near future. D takes e5, f takes e5, possibly bishop to g5, seeking some simplification in the weaknesses of the black pawn structure. But nevertheless, I mean, everyone should be sleeping in on a Sunday morning. I certainly don't blame you. Let's see who the first person that shows up is. As we look at enough arrows, Jack Peters immediately starts to play chess before he's done with the opening. For my youngest of students, I equate it like this. All right, let's just picture this for a moment. You're setting up the pieces on the first rank and the pawns on the second row of each side. You are seated with another opponent, and they start moving their pieces before they've even placed all of their pieces on the board. That's how I feel about setting up the pieces. You place your pieces, you set your pawns, and then you begin the game. In this particular example, the king has not been set, the bishop has not been placed, and White is already starting to play the game. And this is a cause of concern for many, many strong players who see no danger in where their king is placed. They're following the rule, which is a good one, in closed positions. And in semi-closed positions, your king should be just one square away, one move away from castling. So he can be in the center on e8 or e1, but he needs to be able to castle within one move in case anything goes down. And if there is no danger to the king, then it's okay to be uncastled for a moment in time, provided that you are able to castle because there aren't any other threats. That is the key word. c5, d takes c5, bishop takes c5. Black has now completed his opening 2 moves ahead of his opponent. So notice that, for example, the 2 rooks are connected and white is 2 moves behind. You might ask yourself, who moved first in this position? Okay, white moved first, but white spent a considerable amount of time winning a pawn. So white does have a pawn for his 2 tempi of time. But is it just 2 tempi? Is the king really going to be safe on the king's side? Is the king safe at all? That is a question we have to ask ourselves if we're playing white, and if we are relentlessly beginning to play this game without completing our opening. So obviously a move like bishop a3 would finish our development and our piece activity and place us a little bit closer to the realm of safety. But with the move a4, Jack Peters certainly is putting the pressure on his opponent. And now it's entirely up to black to find his way. Knight to d5, king to b8, f5, you choose, right? King to b8, f5, knight to d5, or f5, king to b8, knight to d5. Now imagine those 3 moves in consequence, right? As far as a way of continuing. Yasser Seirawan, of course, goes with a 3rd or a 4th move, however you might look at it. He goes with rook on h to g8, activating the unused rook. What is his worst placed piece? He activates the rook on h8. So, does black have an advantage? Does white have an advantage? Well, the chances are equal. On average, the chances are equal here. It's hard to believe because white is up a pawn, and it is a strong passed pawn. It is something to be concerned about. But black's king is safer, and white's king is something to be concerned about. So, right now, it's probably best if we consider for a moment what white's objective is. If white's objective is truly to attack on the queen side of the board, that is where the king is now residing, this general area, then it might behoove us to have more attackers. And we are very lucky, of course, with 20th century analysis to notice that we need to bring the rook from h1 up and over, and white would be just fine. Believe it or not, if that rook were in the game with the move rook h4, you would be very okay. You might be concerned about moves such as bishop takes f2, queen to c5, removing the defender of the knight on g3. I would be. But not to worry, as we also have bishop to e3 counterattacking the queen on c5, so it doesn't seem like it's that big of a deal. Instead, Jack Peters pushes the envelope just a little bit further toward his opponent, saying, I'm going to close this deal with a win. And again, his rook on h1 is easily a seriously forgotten piece. Knight to d5 and b6. This is a little bit over the top. Now, it's not too late for white to start, battening down the hatches just a little bit. But black really has a tightrope to walk through. We could move our queen to any one of 4 squares, possibly 5. Queen d6, queen e7, queen c6. You also have the outside possibility of playing bishop takes f2 check now. Bishop takes f2, king takes f2, queen c5 can no longer be met by bishop e3 because of the knight on d5. One more time for those of you who are following along. Our queen is being attacked. The pawn on a7 is being attacked. It's supported by a pawn. Certainly, pawn takes pawn or a takes b6, as it is written, could be the optimal move. But another entertaining possibility is bishop takes f2, king takes f2, queen to c5 check. The bishop is not able to interpose on e3 because of the knight. So that blocking is out. And this is an inherent form of counterattacking. King to f1. Rook takes g3. B takes a7. Queen takes a7. I'm very tempted in that position to continue attacking with either a6, rook to b1, perhaps rook to b1 first and then a6, support of the bishop. Does look a little bit sketchy, but it looks entertaining. For me as a streamer, I would certainly be considering the possibility of bishop takes f2 check, king takes f2, queen to c5 check, king must move. Can it move forward? King f3. Hard to believe. In the game, Yasser settled for a takes b6. Good morning, Rubino. Isn't it just a free pawn? Well, the problem is not that it's a free pawn, but that white is opening up lines toward our king. Or white is attempting to open up lines toward our king. You're right, though, but white would have had better chances in this particular position had he gone for this particular endgame. Remember, in the beginning of this game, Rubino, I know you just showed up. One of the legends of our stream, by the way, thanks to one of the earliest bits, one of the earliest, largest bits donations ever. But basically, hold on, I'm just going to play this game through just for you to see it while we catch up. So this was the opening. And I commented before the opening began in its infancy that the h5 pawn often becomes a target and can be won. Black has a difficult time in defending it, but he did loosen white's queenside pawns for compensation. And in this particular setup, black chose instead knight to b6. I think bishop d6 might have been the best move, or f5 might have been the best move. For a practical standpoint, just getting our rook connected and trying to go after the white king. It is not a Caro-Kann sideline. It is one of the main lines. Let's go back in time. I would say that it's not a Caro-Kann sideline because I grew up with it. There are 5 mainline Caro-Kanns. 5 mainline Caro-Kanns. Well, let's just talk about the ones that begin after knight c3, for example. In this particular situation, we've got classical Caro-Kann with Capablanca. We've got the Smyslov variation with knight on b to d7. We have the Bronstein-Larsen variation and the Tartakower variation, which begin with knight f6. So we just have 4 in this particular line alone. We have 4 relative main lines of knight c3 in this line alone. Knight f6 cannot be met by knight g3 because of h5, h4. We had this discussion before. But after knight takes, I today play the move e takes f6, which is the Tartakower variation. This position is relatively equal. Slightly better for white because of the space and the coordination of the pieces. But on average, this line usually runs along the normal territory of and then h5 is the latest and greatest move. This is the state of mainline theory today. This is the beginning position. If we were to play a thematic tournament, from both sides, we would probably have to begin it here if we were going to play the Tartakower variation. But as it turns out, going back to knight f6 check, g takes f6 when I was young was the way to secure that ultimate imbalance. Now, most players just play knight f3 here and allow bishop g4, and black is rolling along with his attack. Honestly, black has all these ideas, and white just plays the simple waiting move, which has to be played sooner or later just to guard the d4 pawn. It's black's only main target in the center. And after a little bit of development, you can already tell that black's bishop is in trouble. And we have this interesting weakening of the queenside pawns, which is relatively, I would say, relatively forced. I mean, after all, what is white going to do if he doesn't follow through on his plan of attacking the pawn? Perhaps white could castle or play bishop d2, threatening greater threats. But b4, and now black gets some counterplay against the center pawns in this particular example with the move e5. So you can already see that the center is about to be undermined with the idea of c5 should a piece need to take on d4. So is e takes d4 a realistic possibility? Not yet. I mentioned earlier that we have to finish our development. We have to finish setting up. What opening did you play before, Ruben, what did you play before? Did you answer e4 with e5? I would hope. The King's Indian. Oh my God. We're like dropping you from like Paris into the Russian subcontinent. That's quite the difference. That is quite the difference. What opening did you grow up playing? Next question. Because I also grew up playing the King's Indian. If that was your earliest experience and first love. King's Indian was certainly my first love. It was the one that I could control everything against d4. But you can't play the King's Indian against e4, so when white played one e4, were you playing the Peerts? You weren't playing the Peerts in the modern. I would recommend, yeah, and you can have a lot of fun with this opening, by the way, as black. By the way, every opening should be learned with the express purpose of one-on-one understanding, hands-on understanding of the ideas. You should not ignore an opening setup just because somebody says it's bad. If you play an opening setup and you find yourself in a difficult situation, this is normal chess playing. Oh, really? So e4, knight f6, though, e5, you can't keep your knight there. You're now playing the Alekai. All right, I'm being fun. So in any event, in this particular position, we mentioned that white's weak knight on e4, on g3 could be bothered by f5, f4. White knight doesn't have e4, so Yasser, of course, being a little bit materialistic, saves his pawn. There's absolutely nothing wrong with this position. Now let's get back to another particular setup. When black was choosing between bishop d6, f5, and knight to b6, for example, when black was choosing between those moves, he also had the possibility of researching this position later. Now, this position could occur more than once in opening tabia or opening theory. And he doesn't necessarily need to give away a pawn in an important tournament game in the U.S. Chess Championship. He can continue with a much more active move, so he chose knight to b6 rather than sacking a pawn with either f5 or bishop d6. And he can always do the research later and prepare the preparation H, as Grandmaster John Horowitz. He can apply the preparation H for later, just in case. So already the removing of the defender of the knight on g3 is in play. And it was here that we actually discussed, and I want to see that line for just a moment. The thing I had not really considered was that if the white king moves forward, can we play e4 check? Wow, the king has to come all the way out into the center? Absolutely. So if the king retreats, we get to attack. By the way, I don't know what you play against in the King's and the classical King's Indian, but this is definitely the best place to start. But it's very addictive. Once you start playing g takes f6, it's like alcohol. I hesitate to say sex, drugs, rock and roll. You just can't get enough of it. That's all I have to say. Is that if you start playing the Bronstein-Larsen variation, you're going to have to know when to stop without an intervention. You are going to have to play e takes f6, the Tartakower variation, when you need to. There's a great book on the Caro-Kann by Joe Gallagher called Starting Out with the Caro-Kann. In fact, the entire Starting Out series by Everyman. If you look up Starting Out Chess, I believe that you'll see all the Starting Out books on Amazon. You can get them on Kindle. You can also get the eChess app. Everyman sells these books at a discounted price, probably half price if you buy them digitally, and you can play through them on your phone. I certainly have quite a number of eChess app books that I never look at. Now, this is a very reasonable continuation. I actually don't see anything at all wrong with the way this might proceed. White still has to find one more very, very, very difficult move here if they want to pursue their advantage. You'll see that the bar is not very high. Bar is extremely low on this particular one. Do I know any good gambits to trick 1400s? Well, ultimately, if you're playing for wins, Rubino, I would suggest playing e4, e5, interestingly enough, because white does not know how to play chess. Answer e4 with e5. Here's the now I'm going to take it back a step, Rubino. If you're playing the Caro-Kann against 1400s, you're not going to be able to win quickly. The real trick here is that you have to walk a very tight rope. And the tightrope is, do I play good solid chess with a fixed center? And I remember having this conversation with Grandmaster Joel Benjamin decades ago. So is e4 and e5 your go-to as a strong player if you have an opponent who is lower rated than you? Or do you go for a semi-open game like a Sicilian where the center is completely flexible, malleable, and the assessments are far more difficult? That's the trick. In an ideal world, you do want to have a malleable center where the opponent can perhaps misunderstand what's going on in the long run. You're asking for something to trick 1400s into a slightly more immediate opening advantage, I believe. So, I mean, you got the Stafford Gambit, you got your Nachmanson Gambit, you got your Eric Rosen complete repertoire to trick 1400s if you'd like. But playing those openings past a certain level is going to hinder your development as a player. It's sort of like, you know, Fruit Loops were my favorite breakfast item when I was... lad, but if I'd eaten Fruit Loops my entire life to the expense of other things, I would not have developed into a healthy human being. So therefore, I moved on to toast and hash browns, and slowly we added what? Some meat items, right? Sausage, who knows what's in that stuff. We added bacon of varieties of sorts that was really bad for you, but it made your body stronger because you got a certain amount of protein. Today, of course, we have much healthier breakfasts, and we have much healthier openings. Your goal is to play a good game of chess. Tricking 1400s is not high on my list. Tricking 1400s is not high on my list as far as being able to win the game. In fact, I do not give 1400s that much respect that I would plan for them. I would say let's work on tricks to beat 2100s and 2000s, the ones that I have a certain amount of difficulty with because they're so close to my rating, and they're the ones that really count. So going back in time to knight b6, this entire counterattack worked out pretty well, with the exception of the fact that after capturing, we had to deal with the move a6. Turns out, you can see by the bar on the engine, right? Why do I not respect you? Of course I respect you. I respect you, but I will treat you, Rubino, as though you were 2100. You, to me, sir, are 2100. I don't think about the ratings that much, but if I had to put a rating on my opponent, you, sir, would be a 2100. I don't believe your rating is real. In fact, your rating is not real. There's no such thing as a 1400. $1400s do not exist in this chess world. To borrow the fear does not exist in this dojo routine. The reason I say that is because everyone plays greater than or less than their rating. So there's a 400-point ELO fluctuation. Any one particular player at the earliest levels can play 400 points above their level or 400 points below their level. That's how the mathematical model is set up, Rubinho. So if your rating really is about 14 or 1500, then you're actually playing at 18 or 1900 when you're on your really good day. You're really pounding it out. You can't maintain that, perhaps, that performance above, but it will bring your rating up. Now, when you bring your game to the table the next day, you actually have to play at that level or greater again. So therefore, you will bring your average above your rating again, playing like a 1700 or an 1800 or a 1900. And guess what? You're no longer a 1400 at that point. Probably the number that is trailing along behind you has drifted up to 1500 or 1550. So you were never really a 1400. The rating is only an average, a temperature gauge average of where your play is. Some of your moves, unfortunately, are going to be below par. And many of your moves are going to be top-notch, and you're going to lose focus. But you are going to be playing at the upper edge of the average of your performance rating, and the performance rating is truly what you're aiming at. So when I play an opponent, they really have to show me with their moves what they are, not with the number that's on the wall chart or the number that's on the screen. I can't believe that number. That number is not real. I don't look at that number. I'm aware of the number. It is about consistency. And if your average remains, if you consistently make moves that are above and below your rating at a consistent level, then your rating will remain the same, such as mine, for example. But, I'd dodge in at about 2200. But do you know why that is? For me, it is a bit about mindset. If I actually put in the time for myself to study, and this is what we are going to be doing here, because thanks to Pegasus, He's asked for my memorable games, Howard Staunton and Paul Morphy studies, and we are going to look at them, and we are going to pick them apart. We are going to compare our moves to them. We are going to match wits with them. I believe I'm 4 studies out. 2.5 studies. And then after this, I'll be only 3 studies out. I digress. Let me get back to Pegasus's study. I'm very thankful you're a subscriber, because I was going to make it sub-only chat. You know? I was actually going to be very, very determined here to make the studies sub-only chat, which of course you already apply. Nobody shows up but the subs anyway. Got like less than 100 subs, on average about 60 to 70, and they all participate, they all show up regularly, and I'm very thankful. Like you, Robin Home, with your massive support. Time for another one. Legends. The legends for the massive support. We have a couple on there that are not streamers, but definitely deserve mention. So in this particular case, after a6, b takes a6, bishop takes a6, king to b8, what does white have? White is going to have to retool just a little bit. The number one factor that's going against this particular brilliancy, and I'm having a tough time with this brilliancy prize for the most part at this present time, is because white has done a great job trying to lose the game. They've not activated their rook on h1. Their king remains in the center. Their knight is completely off sides. The only 4 pieces that they have in the game are the rook, bishop, bishop, and queen. Those are the only 4 attackers they have. And black has several defenders, even though it doesn't appear that the knight can defend as easily. Well, after the move bishop to c4, now black's knight gets to play a greater role because white has pushed it toward it. Let's just imagine for a moment, if I were white in this position, I think we would have to reposition the bishop on f3. We'd definitely have to relocate our pieces toward a better square with bishop e2 and bishop f3. No doubt about it. No choice in the matter. Instead, the move bishop to c4 pushes the knight in the white king's direction. And this is now starting to look just a wee bit sketchy. And if you can imagine that white's best moves are now to defend the pawn, or to defend the pawn, that's very sad. It makes me sad to realize that we have to defend this pawn. On g2. When we could have probably already had our bishop on f3. And that would be certainly worthwhile, because then we'd be threatening checkmate, the pawn would be defended, our king, let's just say if he had a check, our king would just scooch over. Not a big deal. But in this particular instance, after the move king f1, black gets to keep up the pressure. Surprise, 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 surprise. We get to attack again. And then we're relegated to our other candidate move, rook to h2. And if that's not enough, we can already see that there's trouble brewing on the first rank. So black gets to play the move b5. Crazy. Black is simply plowing away with the move b5. And after the move b5, I'm not sure if I see a defense for white. If bishop takes f7, queen takes f7. Thank you very much. right? And after queen takes b7, there's no way for the queen to make its way back toward defending. Or is there? Queen a4. This is almost a good time for candidate moves for black. I gave it the extra minute, by the way. Candidate moves for black in this position. I did manage to get it typed by the time 45 seconds ran into it. In the old days, I used to type candidates for black, or give the candidate moves for black option. And then I'd forget to hit the timer. So we'd spend a lot more than 45 seconds on the position, or 1 minute. But in this manner, I get to hit the clock for 1 minute, and it takes me 15 seconds to get that candidate moves in. One way or the other, whether I type it or not, you're looking for candidate moves for black. I'm really curious as to why one move isn't as good as another move. Well, what do you think? We need to remove, personally, I believe we should remove the defender of d1. So there are obvious moves, of course, like bishop to d3 check, which seems to run into after, well, let's just not take the first one. If the knight blocks, then we just capture. But if the king moves over to e1, then we get to capture on e2, on g2 as well. Bishop d3 check looks devastating. And after bishop d3 check, king to g1, we have bishop to b5 going after the queen. Did you find a move for me here, Rubino? Black to move. Another important concept, rook takes g3 is possible. Also with all the same ideas as above. In fact, I don't think he can actually answer with f takes g3. Because we still have the same move as before, only worse. The move that I was hoping that everyone could see in this particular position is the move queen a6 check. No matter where white moves now, life is going to be very difficult for him. Should he move to g1, then queen takes a4, threatens checkmate, and there's no way to recapture. Just no way to recapture. So we have to stop the bait. But we're walking into a certain discovery here. And there's no way out of this one, as it turns out. I just don't see it. So getting back to our original position after queen a4, when I was asking for candidate moves in this position, ideally, bishop to d3 check, queen to a6 check being the best move, and rook takes g3 certainly had some merit, because this lends itself to the same problem. If he recaptured on g3, white is checkmated no matter what. Like, ta-da! So rook takes g3 was a very valid candidate move. The only drawback with rook takes g3 is that one of our defenders can be removed. We can trade the knight for the knight, and that's not a good thing. This rook's now a defender. And we're not getting mated on the back rank in the near future. We could be getting mated on the back rank, but we won't be getting mated on the back rank right away. So yeah, we always have to keep in mind that our opponent does not have to capture, it's not checkers. So in this particular position, queen to a6 check is key. I hope that's the main line. If I go forward, yes. And only now, after this move, we once again, we're a little late now for rook takes g3. Just a little late for rook takes g3. Did we have that move on king to g1 as well? Let me just take a quick peek here. Rook takes g3. Is that really a move? Oh yes, queen to b3 check. We have to be very mindful and just go straight for the back rank mate. But he may or may not be able to survive this. That's crazy. Good morning, Resistor. Resistor 100, welcome. Namaste. Thank you. Thank you for the gift of your presence. So all in all, going through this particular brilliancy, White failed in a piece relocation exercise here, where the real best move was bishop e2, with the idea of playing bishop f3. And bishop c4 is downright questionable, in fact. Let me just bring this up, put a question mark on it. For the most part, sun is bright coming through the dojo arch in the background. Problem, danger, Will Robinson. b5, removing the defenders of the d1 square. I don't want to give it too much hints. And now, of course, the game is a relatively straightforward win. Is there a further example of a best game prize? To see this particular example. I mean, this opening looks very, very playable the way it is shown here. I mean, it's so tempting to bring in pieces on every level to a certain extent. It's very tempting to actually even think about trying to get our rooks to the first rank. Every black piece, two bishops participating in the attack, tripling on the file. It is official now that black has to give up a piece, and once again, we're going to be removing some defenders. The end of the road as we know it. Yep, there's just no way out. Can't allow that to happen. Yeah, bishop to b3 is a subtle move. And it seems like Guns N' Roses territory here. Ouch! So e4 was not necessarily designed just to take advantage of the pin, by the way. e5 was not just designed to take advantage of the pin on the knight to g3 and or to open up lines, because we have no rooks that can come to the center to defend. But e5 to e4 was really a clearance which black pushed him to attack the knight. And that was the last move of the game, because there's just no defending e2, g2, and the knight on g3 in any way, shape, or form. So yeah, we can block it from the bishop. That doesn't mean we're not losing to queen takes g3. It also doesn't mean that we don't have a further one, which is even worse. Yuck. It's getting kind of hopeless. Bishop c1, queen takes c3 check. Now you might think that we're after the rook, but no, that is not what we're after. We're never really after the rook. We're actually after sealing away the escape squares. Technique. Technique, everyone. Now we come to one of my favorite, absolute favorite players in the entire world, Nick DeFermian, who I believe was an international master at the time as well in 1984. I don't know that he was a grandmaster yet. Grandmaster Nick DeFermian is playing white against Sergei Kudrin in the same U.S. Championship of 1984. I'm going to try to spell DeFermian correctly. Unlike many of the books and periodicals that capitalize it or make it all one word, but it is DeFermian. And Kudrin, Sergei Kudrin now lives just north of me in Connecticut. He still plays chess occasionally on the weekends. This was played in Berkeley, California. Let me make sure I spelled Berkeley correct. I'm going to put Berkeley in the previous one as well. Mainly because, copy, looking at this from White's perspective. I tell you what, I might be doing this book, quite a bit. I need to know that everyone who's been watching has considered purchasing the book. Paul M. Albert, I don't think is with us anymore. Neither is Danny Kopak. I'm not entirely sure about Fatachnik, but I will look him up. You just put Berkeley right in there. U.S. Championship Berkeley, 1984. Oh, and another comma. Everyone knows Yasser Seirawan. Everyone should know Yasser Seirawan. So Nick DeFermian had like the most ideal repertoire, and I learned from his Reykjavik tournament in 1983. By the way, he played in Reykjavik in 1983. It was an invitational tournament. I used to have a players' chess series that gave complete tournaments from certain years. All of those, of course, I hope and pray should be in the chess database. But Grandmaster Nick DeFermian played a very quiet system with the white pieces. And in this particular manner, Nick DeFermian in the previous year had played b3, knight f3, and b3 as white. Meanwhile, as black, he was the most slashing, vicious, attacking player you could ever imagine. He would play the Benoni and the Najdorf as black. And Grandmaster Nick DeFermian, you will now find him doing live streams for the Mechanics Chess Club on Tuesday nights. Usually on Tuesday nights. If you want to see my good old friend Nick. Unfortunately, we've had a lot of great experiences together, which my wife would not necessarily term great experiences together because we lost track of time, and many times she had to come and get me. Not necessarily from the bar floor area, but certainly from the general area of the floor and the bar. But it's very easy to hang out with these grandmasters and repeat very similar experiences, and I wish everyone at least one of these experiences amongst themselves. I'm not even sure International Master John Donaldson is talking to me after another experience involving several very large alcoholic beverages. And a cleanup crew. involving a taxi driver, John trying to get me home, etc. But it's very easy to let things get out of hand. So therefore, do not drink. Especially do not drink and drive. Fortunately, in New York City, you do not have to worry about that. You don't have to worry about drinking and driving in New York City. You can always take a taxi. You can always pick up your car in the tow lot. So E3, now this is very unlike Nick DeFermian. I would never have imagined him being the positional player that he is, but he can play any opening. He's not necessarily a Najdorf player as much as he is a very strong chess player. He uses the Najdorf as a tool. One thing I want everyone to realize is that you are not a London player. God forbid. You're not a Taimanov player, but you are a chess player. You may need to write that about 500 times. A3, D5. Now, one would be, this is a very unassuming opening to a certain extent. And I could easily play this as white as well. Ruben Ho, one of our legends of our stream, who was just here, resist here. I'm not sure what's in the box. Resistor. Resistor. But Ruben Ho, one of the legends of our stream, who was just here, commented that he wanted to try the opening that was played in the previous game as black, and I don't blame you. You can only study so much. I don't expect you to be here for the entirety of 1 or 2 hours, depending on how long the study stream is, because at some point your hunger becomes too great, not just for breakfast, as it was the case with Ruben Ho, as I mentioned, maturing from Fruit Loops to real breakfast items. But c takes d5, knight takes d5, bishop to b5. Where actually this is what's called a bishop dump by Grandmaster Michael Rode. I will give him credit for this really lovely expression involving the bishop dump. Bishop dump is where you get to develop a piece with the utmost force, such as the bishop with check, and now you get to carry on your development no matter what they do. You can almost pre-move your next move regardless of what they do, knowing that you have a further bishop dump coming. So for example, bishop to c6, we could pre-move castling, or we could have pre-moved queen e2. If they tried to throw in knight takes c3, we could always throw in bishop takes c6. Right? So we could have done the bishop dump with queen a4 following. In this particular example, white chooses to follow up by placing his bishop on a better square toward the king. Now, this may not have been the best move, right? There were many good moves following up, threatening knight takes d5, threatening to just basically try to prevent bishop d6 because the knight takes d5. Queen e2, definitely one of them. What else does white have in this particular position? On the white side of this particular opening for the white side seems to be a staple of quite a few American grandmasters. I see Larry Christensen on the white side against Alexander Shabalov, Grandmaster Joel Benjamin against Dmitry Gurevich on the white side of this particular opening. Very, 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 very serious opening system for white. I'm definitely lacking in development in this particular one, so I'm going to catch up on it. So yeah, a4 is also an outside possibility, but he chose bishop to d3, moving the same piece twice in the opening with the idea, the express idea that this knight and this bishop are stepping upon each other with colors reversed fashion. Knight to d7. And after castles, bishop to e7. Notice that bishop to d6 could easily run into knight takes d5 and rook e1 check should the pawn recapture. And bishop d6 could also run into knight to b5. So we want to watch out for defending against those possibilities as well. So bishop e7 is a nice universal defensive place for the bishop. And now it comes time for candidates for white. Candidate moves for white. When you're looking for candidate moves, one more time, we're going to talk about how you can stockpile ideas across variations. So in other words, if you come up with 3 or 4 candidate moves in this position and you use only one of those moves, you have 3 or 4, you have 2 or 3 left in your catalog of candidate moves that could come up in the variations to come. Looking for candidate moves rewards you not just in the present position, but in all of the immediate and future positions to come. Also opening up your eyes to all the possibilities, looking for candidate moves in these positions that could improve white's game. Victor Fermion, of course, does not play the move that is recommended by Star-Kissed Tuna. Star-Kissed Tuna number 14 recommends the simple developing move, bishop to d2. Star-Kissed Tuna's second choice in this position is h3. But I am focusing on Nick Fermion's move because it's a move of the everyman. Played the second most popular move in the position. This position is relatively unexplored by everyone except for Richard Rapport as white. And because it's been relatively unexplored by everyone except for Richard Rapport as white, you might notice that while bishop d2 could be the best move, let's go back to our attacks. While bishop to d2 could be our best move, h3 being perhaps the next best move, no one has ever played these moves in a real tournament game. Instead, bishop to c2 with the very, what's the right word? With the very primitive idea of going after the king has been played by Grandmaster Gilberto Smilos against Bent Larson, no less. And Eugenio Torre, the strongest player in the Philippines, has also played this move. But on the whole, bishop to b1 is the only other move played by Igor Ivanov, I believe, in another U.S. championship game. Let's take a quick peek. I take that back. Played another open event in 1996. In any event, Nick Fermion's move is knight to e4. I would hope that someone had considered that possibility of knight to e4 here. After all, it is why we play the game, to centralize our pieces. Centralize, centralize, centralize. This move, of course, has the company of not just Nick Fermion, but Peter Svidler as white against Morozevich, Richard Rapport against Sasi Karen, even more recently. And there's absolutely nothing wrong with it. And now we're going to see, let's say, the follow-up to this idea. Yes, move number 14 for white. A move that may or may not have been in your candidates from the previous one. Candidate moves for white. Remember, you're looking for not the best move, but all the good moves in the position for whom you can compare to find the best possible moves. Wow. We do have a very important birthday today to celebrate. Setting up our stream title here. Coming up in just less than an hour, we have the Swiss. I would love one candidate move. Let me just make sure that can I change my stream title? I don't know yet. We're getting there. That much is true. Paste. I will probably get there in short order. Then we're going to grab her World Championship information. Paste right there as well, just in case we need it. I'm coming. All right, let's do another one. The move chosen by Nick Fermian in this particular position was knight e5, grabbing that outpost square. Notice that this candidate move was not possible previously because of the knight eyeing the square. So every time your opponent makes a move, it may or may not increase the possibilities of candidate moves for you. So knight e5 is perfectly reasonable. Bishop to b7, safeguarding his knight. And now the next move, of course, is pretty logical. Nick Fermian, attacking beast that he is, knight to g5, hacking away at black's position. Reminds me a lot of a Californian Judith Polgar. Or was Judith Polgar a Hungarian Nick Fermian? That's a good question, yeah? It's much easier to learn to attack and to be a vicious attacker and tone yourself down later than it is now. So after the move queen to c7, we need one more touch upon this particular setup. And we will go with some candidate moves for white in this position as we get set up for the next moment. All right. Well, we have the first part out. Now, this is a very difficult one, but if we're going to take advantage of the black queen in this particular position, we already have a candidate move from our past that we perhaps did not give it the absolute note that we did, that we could have then, for maybe a clearer advantage than now. But the move bishop to d2, preparing to clear the square to bother the black queen. This does work on several levels. Basically, we are going to need this bishop. We might even need to put it on that direction. We might need to connect our rooks to be able to lift the rook up and over as well. And we will have to choose that move carefully when the time comes. But obviously, after rook on a to d8, rook to c1 was the intention. Queen to b8. Now, black's plan was not without merit. Queen to c7 allowed the rook on a8, the forgotten rook, to shift into the position. And now, is it that important to defend? Queen to b8 perhaps could have been a less than stellar move, as the queen is now a little bit offsides. Queen to e2 takes direct aim at not only the king side, but queen to c2 could have probably also targeted the white squares on the queen side as well, trying to weaken the point of f7 and g6. But after queen to c2, g6 would need to be played. And after the move, then perhaps we might even come in on this diagonal with the threat and with the pin. All we have to do is get rid of the knight on f6. So queen to c2, g6, queen to d1. What a clever maneuver by Starkist Tuna. I'll give him full credit for that move. Absolutely full credit. So by bringing the rook into the game with a gain of time, Nick Fabian continues with his plan, and you can see that already that white's very primitive option of trying to place his queen on d3 is still viable. Candidate moves for white. In this position, on move number... Candidate moves for white on move number 20. All right. Hopefully you tested yourself in this particular position, looking for the best possible move. There were several that were very promising. I would say the outside move that was probably also promising was h4. Obviously, with the idea of pushing to h6 and weakening all the squares out in anticipation of the possibility of g6. Another move, of course, with the gain of tempo on the queen on c7 was the rook lift and shift to h3. I can't stress that one enough, how important that game is. And at the same time, this knight retreat, sorry, bishop retreat, followed by the knight retreat. The strongest possible move, of course, was played by Nick Fermian, and that is knight to g4, simply removing the defenders and the position by force. How many defenders do we have? Not enough for black at this point. Not enough for black. So he tries to reinforce his center. And then we go for the 2 in the 1-2 punch. Let's continue with the 2 in the 1-2 punch. Candidates for white. Relentless application of your skills versus the master's. Relentless application of your skills versus the master's. Just want to see if I have this U.S. Championship book written by Christensen in the early 1980s. No, I only have the 1983 and the 1981 U.S. Championships. I'm going to have to hunt down the 1984 U.S. Championship book by Larry Christensen. Perhaps even the 1982 U.S. Championship book by Larry Christensen. Both are deserving of an audience. Every book that was written on the U.S. Chess Championship. And of course, if you are looking for it, you can contact Fred Wilson Books here in New York City. He is the #1 person to find information on rare and out-of-print books. It's going to have to be a 3-parter. Murat, how are you, sir? Good morning. We are doing a wee bit of study. Well, the next most important move, I have to admit, some of you may have put the knight back on e5. This could have led to a repetition in position, right? If you put your knight back on e5, if you were at all concerned about moving your knight, and the h2 square, which was about to be commenced. What other move could we have had? In this particular position, knowing what we know now, we could actually possibly play the move rook to c3. Is that a realistic possibility? Rook to c3? And certainly not knight takes c3, because the world would be coming to an end after knight takes f6. Check. G takes f6, queen h5. That's not a realistic possibility, right? But rook c3, black would have to dig deep into his arsenal and just try to hold out against this onslaught. Unfortunately, black has just enough to defend. Even though white is still crazily attacking. Absolutely insane. Absolutely insane attack on white's part. The knight can't be captured. Wow. What a move. Rook to c3. Crazy, crazy, crazy move. Insane. Rook to c3. I would definitely be looking at this move quite a bit. In fact, in a class, I would actually expect the students to analyze it quite deeply. But if it weren't for knight e5, which repeats the position, we also have the brute force move, queen to d3, which gets right straight to the point. And we already know what's going to happen now. We've talked about it before. g6, queen h3, Now black has to find the best possible defense, and he stumbles. I don't know if it was through overconfidence that black felt he was defended enough times, or what. But once again, it is not just the weakness of the dark squares, but also the weakness of the white squares, E6 and F7, that are going to come into a lot of pressure. Good morning, TFS from Germany. How are you? Ha 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 ha! No moves from me. But that is the best time to give moves. That is the best time to give moves, to compare. We definitely have a Swiss coming up, by the way, that should not be missed. The Hao Yi Fan birthday Swiss. I haven't checked it yet to make sure that no one has entered who can be knocked out. So make sure that I'm in as well. BMV 1951, Luis Ayala from Peru is already in. And he is present, which is good. In any event, black's best move in this particular position might have been to at least counterattack the rook. Another good defensive try in this position, a more direct defensive try, would be h5. But instead, I don't even know where black came up with this move. Bishop to B, bishop to f4. I wouldn't say that he's not trying, but it definitely does beg the question, who do you think you are? Since we already have the same tactic with the king and the queen here, maybe those of you can analyze forwards toward it with candidate moves for white. Not just candidate moves. You should be able to analyze forward in this particular position and see the next two moves, based on that move having been a question mark. I really do need to run for coffee before this tournament starts. Are we going to make it? That I do not know. Will we make it? Hopefully soon, and yes. So, the logical step, move by move, in this particular position is to take the f7 pawn and remove the defender of e6, so we can do it in 2 steps. Now we already know...
This nation owes you a huge debt.
Thank you for following Prayful Chess. Great to have you. Where are you from? Tell us a little bit about yourself. I am FIDE trainer, national master in the United States, John MacArthur. I live in New York City. I've won my share of tournaments. People seem to care about money. I don't, as far as that goes. Otherwise, I wouldn't be doing this. If I cared about money, I would not be streaming. I would be teaching. This is a tough gamble. I'm doing this because I love it. So obviously, king to h8 runs into the direct and ever so brutal double winning of an exchange, perhaps. Because we're going to capture. Or we play our king to g7, as happened in the game. Knight on h to f7 sets up the further family fork of knight to f6, attacking all of these. Oh, I didn't send my student the work that he needed to do. Darn it. I was hoping he would be able to do it on the weekend. But we're gonna see these two games for the most part. With this one, right? And he chooses to take the rook. Why? That's a good question. Because it's the better move, obviously. Knight takes f4 is also a very good move. But I just have to take a quick glance at what's going on here. Knight takes e6. Nick, this is crazy. Did Black have a better move? That doesn't get mated? In any event, he tries to lock the queen out from going to e6. Basically, if a move like rook to d7, queen to d6 is queen to e6 check is the threat. So instead, he tries knight to g4 and candidates for white. I'm going to need coffee. That's all there is to it. I'm going to need coffee replenished. I do, in fact. The next opportunity for you to play with me will be in the morning Swiss today. Normally, it would be in the morning arena. Especially if you are here at this time of day, every day. You'll be able to check the times in the dojo calendar because I play every single day, and sooner or later we will play. Aside from that, one-on-one. If you'd like a one-on-one match, you should check our rewards queue. Wonder if I have the word join as a command. I don't think I do. I noticed that Nemsco had join as an option. And I thought that was very, very cool because in my day, join meant something totally different. Join. In any event, as it turns out, the move rook to e8 check puts black away. And in this particular moment, black is in trouble because there's no way out of this. We can't block with a rook. Or can we? Can we block with a rook? Or are we going to lose even more material? Rook takes f8, queen takes f8. Are we just up an exchange and winning? This seems like it should be more. Obviously, king to g7 runs into knight e6 check, right? Obviously, king to g7 runs into knight e6 check, but rook to e8 check. If rook f8, I mean, we have the obvious, but we don't have the slow option of knight e6 because of we have to actually play not this, but queen takes. So now the moment of truth. Do we capture the bishop? No. We still have a little bit of a problem on our hands. We play knight takes bishop. There's a lot of counterplay. A lot. Counterplay. But rook to c8 is a move. Knight takes bishop. Knight takes b7. Queen takes f2 check. King h1. Having a tough time trying to stop rook c8 check. But we also have to watch out for the first rank so many ways. Why do we want material? Do we have anything more than this? We also have queen takes g4, queen takes d8, and then bishop a2, pinning the knight, and threatening all sorts of stuff. All sorts of stuff. That's certainly a very good continuation. Faithful Chess, are you joining the Swiss? Let's just check. Let me refresh my Swiss list. Right now we only have 2 people in the Swiss. Did I send out the notification to the entirety of the members? I do not know. I did send out the notification. I'll do it again shortly. Maybe I sent it too early. Starting soon was not starting so soon, because we have 15 minutes until the Swiss starts. I should check to see how our socials are working. I put up a poll on the new time control for the morning arenas on Twitter. Please check it out. You'll find it in my thread. I probably need to retweet it. But if it's pinned to the top of my... it is pinned to the top. Right now we have 5-3. With 23 hours left. I don't know if we can do a 40-minute training arena at 5-3 because the restrictions on the amount of time and the number of games that need to be completed. We might need a 45-minute arena. We might need to start a little bit earlier. But in any event, let's not go into that particular one. Let's promote this variation just to being reality. So instead of this, the move I wanted to see was queen knight takes. Oh, and we lose. Ooh, we lose. So we have nothing to fear from rook to c8, eh? Because the knight is on d5. He gets. We're being faced with knight to f2, queen takes b1, or queen takes c1 checkmate. All the time. That is craziness, I have to admit. Black actually wins. The knight takes b7 would be a blunder, throwing away the entire game. So we still have to be careful in this position. Maybe he resigned a little bit too soon. I guess maybe he didn't even consider moves like knight takes b7, where the knight is even trapped in that corner and it's not getting out. Interestingly enough, the best possible move in this particular position, albeit not queen g4, is simply just to guard the knight. That's a hard thing. Defending, and keeping all the pieces on the board. Very difficult move to decide upon. Let's say black tries for counterplay against the rook. Now we threaten to come in all over again. Can we use the knight on G, or do we need to use the knight on... We can't use the knight on D because of the E7 square, so we have to use the knight on G. And we're just plain losing. Oops, dropped the queen on the wrong square. Now we safely can take the bishop. That's no good. No good! The Fabian Kudrin, Berkeley, 1984, U.S. Championship Brilliancies. So what was the brilliancy in a sense, right? What was the brilliancy? The brilliancy was knight takes d8 over knight takes f4. The move knight takes f4 probably would have sufficed. This game is not at all clear. It certainly is two pieces for a queen, but it's not at all clear as the game continuation. Knight takes d8. After knight to g4, rook to e8 check was the final move of the game. And what was going to happen on a move like rook e7? I guess everybody's overworked. Are we up in material yet? We're up an entire rook in this position. It is quite crazy, yeah? Oh, I can't see my chat. It is quite crazy. U.S. Championship Brilliancies 1984, as requested by Pegasus. Well, we do have a Swiss coming up. Someone did ask me when I play viewers. I do play viewers every single day in the form of an arena or a Swiss. There's also rewards set up because I played many, many matches, best of 12, only a few matches, best of 24. No one knows what a best of 24 match is. But a world championship match is best of 24, to be honest. That is a world championship match. It says we have a couple of spectators. But I am FIDE trainer and National Master John MacArthur. If you are interested in becoming a better chess player, there's no better place to do it than in our dojo. Applying yourself every day, becoming a part of the stream, obtaining commentary on your games, live commentary on your games, every single time. Even if I'm not playing, let's just say I'm finished with my game, I will probably have had the opportunity to help you out one way or the other. Try to bounce that monkey off there. Try to bounce that monkey off there. But there is a lot of room. There's a lot of room for improvement in chess if you wish to apply yourself. DFS is digesting. We are migrating to our morning Swiss. I'm going to change the stream title very quickly. And I'm going to send out, hopefully, see, I have to change the stream title over here as well. Oh no, it's not February 26th anymore. No. Now February 27th. You guys have to help me out in that sense, right? World Women's Grandmaster and World Champion. Hao Yi Fan. Coming up. We will continue this because I'm enjoying it so much. U.S. Championship Brilliancies. Not high on our spectators list, as it turns out. Don't forget the coffee, indeed. Absolutely, I'm not going to forget the coffee. We've changed our stream title. We've changed that. All we need is a stream notification for the most part. And I do need to set one more thing. I'm going to turn off my sound. What? My output device is now the sound touch. What's going on with that? Not supposed to be the sound touch. Turn that off. See what it is. Oh, now it is, of course. Let's give ourselves some morning music. See what happens. We'll fire up some morning music.
Streets empty. The only thing I see is my own silhouette. I'm getting.
That was weird. Oh, I see. Soundtrack by Twitch did not leave. Now we've got it. All right, fair enough. Don't forget the coffee. Thank you, TFS. I appreciate it. We have 7 minutes before the Swiss starts. I hope everyone is able to join it. We usually have quite a number if you check the tournament history. I think you can find it under events. Oh, that's the Google Calendar. That's the Google Calendar, and the calendar is the dojo. No, the calendar is the calendar. And the dojo, we've got what you need. Welcome to the dojo. I'm going to make sure that I come up in the right window. I close a lot of things just to make sure we have the right output device. Because for the tournaments, and I'll test our sound alerts. Find out, this is the main way I find out whether or not my system is working. We will be right back.